I have to tell you that I absolutely hate to travel. It is truly one of my least favorite things to do in the world, and I especially hate when I am forced to do it for my job. About a year ago, my boss informed me that I had to travel to a location that was only about a 3-hour drive from where I worked. The area where I had to go is considered absolutely beautiful by all the tourists who visit it every year. It has lovely rolling hills, dense green forests, and a very peaceful, quiet atmosphere. Because of this, I thought it would be a wonderful excuse to bring my wife along with me. She always gets very upset and lonely when I have to travel away for work, so this seemed like a great opportunity to include her in the trip. I figured she could spend her days enjoying the local scenery, going on long hikes through the woods, visiting the cute local shops, or just sitting around the house relaxing. Then, because my work schedule was relatively light, I would be back around the early afternoon every day. That meant we would have the rest of the afternoon and the entire night to do whatever she wanted to do together. We spent several nights searching through various travel websites before we finally found a listing for a cute little house that was mostly secluded. The description on the website promised a peaceful retreat away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was not completely in the middle of nowhere, which was comforting to us, but it was definitely separated from the other neighboring houses in the area by a very thick patch of tall pine trees. On the first night we arrived, we walked around the house to check it out. I remember my wife looking around the cozy living room and telling me that she would absolutely love to buy a house just like this one someday. Even though the house itself was quite small, it had a very large basement that was completely packed with old storage boxes. At the time, we did not think anything of it. We just unpacked our bags, had a quiet dinner, and went to bed. But little did I know, our short trip was about to turn into an absolute nightmare. The very first morning of our stay, I woke up right at 6 o'clock in the morning. I needed to get ready for my first day of work meetings. As soon as I reached over and turned off my phone alarm, the first thing I noticed was that my wife was not lying in bed next to me. This immediately caused me to jump out of bed with a sudden spike of anxiety. She is normally a very heavy sleeper who loves to sleep in, so her being out of bed this early was highly unusual. I walked out of the bedroom, down the quiet hallway, and into the kitchen. There she was, sitting on one of the tall wooden bar stools near the kitchen counter. She was holding a mug of warm coffee and scrolling slowly on her phone. I walked up to her and asked her why she was awake so early. She looked up at me, and I could instantly see the sheer exhaustion written all over her face. She told me that she simply could not sleep. She explained that she had woken up suddenly in the very middle of the night. When she rolled over to her side, she thought she could see the distinct shape of a person standing perfectly still in the far corner of the dark bedroom. She tried to squint and focus her eyes in the pitch-black room, but it was just too dark to be absolutely certain of what she was looking at. She eventually rolled back over, trying to convince herself that it was just her mind playing tricks on her. But just as she was starting to fall back asleep, she heard a faint rustling sound coming from that exact same corner of the room. After that, she was wide awake. She said she could not shake the terrifying feeling that someone was standing in the darkness, watching her sleep. At 5 o'clock in the morning, she decided she could not handle lying in the dark anymore, so she got up, made coffee, and had been sitting in the kitchen ever since. I felt absolutely terrible for her. I could see in her eyes that she was still deeply shaken and afraid. I got ready for my work meeting, but before I left, I asked her if she was going to be okay. She assured me that she would be fine. She told me she was going to take a hot shower, get dressed, and then go explore the local town. She made it clear that she had no desire to stay inside that house alone any longer than she absolutely had to. As I was preparing to leave, she was laying out her clothes on the mattress so they would be ready for her after her shower. I kissed her goodbye, and I could hear the sound of the shower turning on as I walked out the front door. According to what she told me later, when she finished her shower and walked back into the bedroom, she immediately noticed something strange. The clothes she had laid out on the bed were not in the exact position she had left them. Instead of being folded neatly and stacked on top of each other, they were half unfolded and spread out in a single horizontal row across the mattress. She felt her heart race, and she tried to tell herself that it must have just been her imagination. But then she realized she could not find her socks. She was absolutely certain that she had placed her socks right next to the pile of clothes. But now they were completely gone. She searched the entire bedroom, but the socks were nowhere to be found. She felt like she was going completely crazy. Terrified and wanting to get out of the house as fast as possible, she grabbed a different pair of socks, threw them on, and ran out the front door. Since I had taken our rental car to my work meeting, she had to call an Uber to take her into the town. During the morning, I noticed that her text messages were very strange. Normally, she is a very expressive texter who uses lots of words and emojis, but on this morning she was giving me short, one-word answers. I knew something was wrong. Fortunately, my work meeting ended earlier than expected, so I drove into town to meet her for lunch. When I sat down across from her at the restaurant, she looked incredibly pale and unwell. That was when she told me about the situation with her clothes on the bed and how her socks had mysteriously vanished. I sat there in silence, not knowing what to say. I believed her completely, because I knew she would never make something like that up, but I had absolutely no logical explanation for how any of it could have happened. Since I was finished with my work for the day, we spent the entire afternoon walking around the town together. We visited different shops and had a really wonderful time. By the time we got back to the rental house and made dinner, she seemed to be doing much better. The strange events of the morning seemed to have faded from her mind, and I was relieved to see her smiling again. But that peace did not last long. In the middle of the night, I felt my wife shaking my shoulder. I woke up instantly, and she whispered to me that she had just heard a very weird noise. As soon as she said those words, I heard it too. It was the unmistakable sound of someone walking around somewhere inside the house. I could feel her entire body trembling next to me. She clutched my arm and begged me not to leave the bedroom, but I knew I had to go investigate. I needed to know if someone had broken into the house. I quietly stepped out of bed and crept through the dark hallway. I searched the living room and the kitchen, but everything looked completely normal. The only thing that stood out to us as unusual was that one of the closet doors in the hallway was wide open. I know it sounds foolish, but I tried to rationalize it in my mind. I told myself that the closet door must have just swung open on its own due to a draft, and that must have been the creaking sound we heard. I even stepped up to the closet, opened it fully, and looked inside to make sure it was empty. It was completely bare. I walked back into the bedroom and told my wife that the house was clear, and that there was absolutely nothing to worry about. But she was not convinced. She was completely convinced that something was terribly wrong. She was too terrified to go back to sleep, so I decided to stay awake with her for the rest of the night. The next morning, I got ready for work, and she got dressed immediately as well. She refused to stay in that house alone for even a single second. We met up again for lunch, and she looked at me with tears in her eyes. She asked me if we could please go back to the house, pack up our things, and leave. I felt an incredible wave of guilt. I had to tell her that we needed to stay for just one more night because I had a final, mandatory meeting the following morning that I simply could not miss. I offered to pack our things and check us into a nearby hotel, but because we had already spent so much money renting this house, she insisted that she would try to tough it out for one final night. When we returned to the house, we packed up all of our bags and placed them near the door so we could make a very fast exit the next morning. We ordered a pizza for dinner and sat on the couch in the living room. I could tell she was terrified of the thought of going to sleep. To keep her mind distracted, I pulled out my phone, and we started playing a trivia game together. But as we were sitting there, we began to hear a dull scraping noise coming from the basement below us. Every single time the noise occurred, my wife would physically shrink back in fear. I tried to tell her that it was just an old house making normal noises as the temperature changed, but she could not accept that explanation. Finally, I decided that I had to go down into the basement to prove to her that the house was safe and that there was no one down there. She begged me not to go, but I told her that I needed to do this so she could finally get some peace of mind. I opened the basement door and walked down the creaking wooden steps. The basement was massive and completely filled with old storage boxes. The only light source was a single dusty bulb hanging from the ceiling that cast a dim, yellow glow over the room. I walked around the stacks of boxes, checking behind them to make sure no one was there. Everything seemed normal and I felt a sense of relief. Just as I turned around to walk back up the stairs, something caught my eye in the far corner of the basement. I stopped in my tracks and turned around to look closer. Standing perfectly still in the dark shadow of the corner was a man. He was wearing a bright red hat. He was standing so incredibly still that for a brief second I actually thought my eyes were playing tricks on his silhouette. I thought it might be a mannequin or an old coat rack that the owners had left down there. But as I took a slow step closer to get a better look, the man blinked. My heart stopped. I felt a surge of pure panic shoot through my entire body. I turned around, bolted up the wooden stairs as fast as my legs could carry me, and slammed the basement door shut behind me. I grabbed my wife by the arm and yelled at her to get to the car right away. I told her to get in the driver's seat while I grabbed our bags. We had 3 bags in total. I grabbed 2 of them and threw them out the front door, shouting at her to load them into the trunk. Then I ran back inside the dark house to grab our final bag and our phone chargers from the bedroom. As I was running back down the hallway toward the front door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The basement door was now standing wide open, and the hallway closet door was slightly ajar. I took a deep breath, sprinted past the open doors as fast as I could, threw the final bag into the back seat of the car, and jumped into the passenger seat. I slammed the car door shut, and my wife hit the gas, speeding away from the house. Once we were a safe distance away, I called the rental manager on the phone. I explained in a frantic voice that there was an intruder living inside the house. But the woman on the other end of the line began to argue with me, telling me that I must be mistaken, and that it was probably just a wild animal. I was so angry and frustrated by her response that I simply hung up the phone. Thankfully, we made it out of that situation completely unharmed. But just because we survived does not make the experience any less terrifying. The reality was that this mysterious man had been lurking in that dark basement, wandering around the house with us all weekend, watching my wife sleep, and even stealing her socks. I do not even want to think about what his ultimate intentions were. I know I could have pushed the police or the rental company to investigate further, but I decided to just let it go. Having an entire house to yourself when you travel is a nice idea, but after that weekend, I think I am going to stick to hotels for a very long time. They might have their own creepy moments, but at least in a hotel, you expect to have other people around you, and hopefully, those people will not be hiding in your room, watching you sleep. And so, that brings me to another experience that completely ruined the idea of a relaxing vacation. I enjoy traveling, but I absolutely hate doing it alone. Because of this, whenever I have to go on a trip, I like to invite whatever girl I am dating at the time to accompany me. One of the most memorable trips I ever took was a vacation to Costa Rica with a girl named Julie, whom I had been seeing for a couple of months. We booked a stay at the Four Seasons Resort, which was a truly beautiful place in every possible way. From the moment we pulled up to the main lobby, we were greeted with fresh tropical drinks and warm towels. The entire property was impeccably designed with lush landscaping, open-air buildings, and stunning views of the ocean. It was easily one of the most luxurious and expensive resorts I had ever stayed at in my entire life, but I wanted to make sure this trip was special. The incredible amenities and the stunning views made it feel worth every single penny. For the first 3 days, our vacation was absolutely perfect. We spent our time relaxing by the pool, eating delicious food, and exploring the beautiful tropical landscape. But on our 3rd night, everything changed. We had just finished a wonderful dinner and spent some time sitting on the beach watching an incredible fire show. As the night went on, the pool and the public areas slowly began to clear out. Eventually, we realized that we were the only guests left awake. We decided it would be fun to run back to our room, grab the bottle of tequila we had bought, along with some mixers, and bring them to the outdoor hot tub near the main pool. The hot tub was beautiful. It was almost completely surrounded in every direction by dense tropical trees and leafy green plants. The hot tub was truly a masterpiece of resort design, surrounded on all sides by lush foliage. The water was perfectly heated, and steam rose into the cool night air, creating a beautiful dreamlike atmosphere. The only opening was a narrow stone walkway to get in and out. There was also a beautiful waterfall feature that spilled water into the hot tub, creating a constant, loud rushing sound. The loud waterfall helped us feel completely isolated from the rest of the world. This meant we could talk and laugh as loud as we wanted, without worrying about disturbing any other guests. We were having a wonderful time drinking and talking in the hot tub. But our fun was suddenly interrupted. I happened to look through the thick leaves of the surrounding plants, and I noticed something that made me freeze. Someone was on the other side of the greenery, creeping around in the shadows. This was not just a guest walking along the path. This person was crouching down low to the ground, deliberately spying on us through the leaves. I immediately shouted out to let them know I saw them. Then I struggled to get out of the hot tub. As you know, climbing out of a wet pool or hot tub takes a few seconds, which gave the person a head start. By the time my bare feet hit the cold concrete walkway, I saw a figure hurrying away in the distance. The person turned a sharp corner and disappeared into the dark. Julie was calling out to me from the hot tub, telling me to just come back and leave it alone. But my adrenaline was pumping, so I ran down the path and turned the exact corner where the figure had disappeared. When I rounded the corner, I saw absolutely nothing. The path was completely empty and dark. It led toward the guest units, which happened to be the same direction as our own room. I walked back to the hot tub, and Julie and I tried to laugh it off to keep from getting too scared. But the truth was, the relaxed vibe was completely dead. We no longer felt like we had any privacy. We grabbed our towels and started walking back to our room. To get back to our suite from the pool area, we had to walk along a very dark dirt path at night. The path was sandwiched between the guest buildings on one side and the thick, dense jungle on the right side. When we got directly across from our unit, which was located on the first floor, we suddenly heard a very loud rustling sound coming from the jungle to our right. Now, because we were in Costa Rica, we knew there were all kinds of wild animals in the jungle, and hearing rustling sounds was completely normal. But this specific rustling stood out to me. It sounded much heavier and more intense than any animal. It sounded like a human being moving through the thick brush. Julie was terrified, and she gripped my arm, pleading with me to go inside. I handed her our wooden key card and told her to go open the door and get inside the safety of the room. I stepped closer to the edge of the jungle to take a closer look into the darkness. That was when I started to hear a bizarre, low buzzing sound. It did not sound like a bug or an animal. It sounded like a human being making a low, grumbling, vibrating noise with their throat. It sounded like a very deep guttural vibration, almost like someone was clearing their throat, but in a rhythmic, terrifying pattern. It was incredibly unnatural and creepy. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and my survival instincts immediately kicked in, telling me that whoever was in there was not normal. Suddenly, whoever was hiding in the bushes scattered away, running deeper into the dark jungle. My heart was in my throat. I turned around, hurried inside the room behind Julie, and slammed the heavy wooden door shut, locking it securely. Julie told me she had not heard the strange buzzing noise, but she had definitely heard the sound of someone scurrying away into the brush. It truly felt like we were being targeted and stalked by someone. We tried to calm our nerves and eventually went to sleep, comforting ourselves with the fact that no one could get inside our locked room. The next morning, we were lounging on the beach, trying to enjoy our final full day. We decided to mention the strange encounter to one of the resort workers, just as a friendly warning so they could keep an eye out for any suspicious people. We stayed on the beach for a few hours relaxing in the sun. During that time, a man dressed in the official resort employee uniform walked up to our lounge chairs. He was holding a professional camera. The camera he was holding was a very professional, heavy-looking digital camera with a massive lens. He held it up with both hands, adjusting the zoom ring with a practiced motion. He smiled warmly and asked us if we would mind posing for a quick photo. The logo on his polo shirt looked slightly faded compared to the crisp uniforms of the other workers. We thought this was a normal resort activity, so we smiled and posed. He snapped the photo, thanked us with a smile, and walked away. We watched